Ships do not invent law out of philosophy books, they invent it out of storms, shipwrecks, and arguments shouted on the quay. Long before emperors compiled codes or jurists argued in marble halls, sailors in the eastern Mediterranean already knew one brutal truth: if the sea takes everything, everyone loses. The Rhodian sea law, lex Rhodia de iactu, was born from that reality. It is often described politely as the Mediterranean's first maritime code, but in truth it was something sharper, a hard-headed social contract forged between merchants, captains, and crews who lived at the mercy of wind and wave. This law did not emerge from Rome, Athens, or Babylon, but from Rhodes, a small island with outsized influence. Sitting at the crossroads of Aegean, Levantine, and Egyptian trade routes, Rhodes became, by the Hellenistic period, the place where maritime custom turned into binding norm. What makes the Rhodian sea law remarkable is not only its age, but its logic. It treated risk as something shared, not dumped on the unlucky. Rhodes, an island that ruled the waves. Rhodes was not a large empire, but it understood power differently. Its wealth came from ships, not land, from contracts, not conquest. By the 3rd to 2nd centuries BCE, Rhodian merchants dominated shipping lanes from the Black Sea to Alexandria. With that dominance came disputes, cargo thrown overboard in storms, masts cut away to save hulls, merchants arguing over who should pay for losses. Instead of handling each case ad hoc, Rhodians developed maritime customs that everyone in their trading network accepted. These customs were not written as a neat code at first. They lived in practice, repeated so often that they hardened into law. Eventually, other powers, especially Rome, recognized their usefulness and absorbed them. That alone should make us pause. Rome, famously arrogant about its own legal genius, openly acknowledged that Rhodian maritime law was superior at sea. The heart of the law, general average. At the core of the Rhodian sea law lies one concept that still governs modern shipping: general average. The idea is simple, almost obvious once stated. If a ship is in mortal danger and part of the cargo is deliberately sacrificed to save the whole, thrown into the sea, cut loose, destroyed, then the loss should not fall solely on the owner of that cargo. Instead, everyone who benefited from the sacrifice must contribute proportionally to the loss. In ancient terms, if your amphory of wine were tossed overboard to save the ship, the merchant whose grain arrived safely does not get to shrug and say, "Bad luck." He pays his share. This principle was revolutionary because it replaced raw misfortune with collective responsibility. The sea was unpredictable, but law could make its consequences fairer. Why this mattered in practice? Maritime trade in antiquity was extremely high risk. Ships hugged coastlines, relied on seasonal winds, and faced pirates, reefs, and sudden storms. A single voyage could ruin a merchant, or make him rich. Before the Rhodian principle, disputes often ended violently or in endless feuds. Captains might refuse to sacrifice cargo for fear of lawsuits, merchants might accuse crews of theft. The Rhodian rule solved a coordination problem. It encouraged decisive action in emergencies, knowing that losses would be shared later. In modern economic language, the Rhodian sea law reduced moral hazard and aligned incentives. In ancient language, it simply made people trust each other enough to keep trading. Rome adopts the Rhodian wisdom. The true legacy of the Rhodian sea law becomes visible when Rome enters the story. By the late Republic and early Empire, Roman merchants dominated Mediterranean commerce, but they did not reinvent maritime law from scratch. Instead, Roman jurists explicitly referred to lex Rhodia. The clearest evidence appears in Justinian's Digest, compiled in the 6th century CE but preserving much earlier juristic opinions. One famous passage states, "If goods are thrown overboard to lighten a ship, the loss is made good by the contribution of all." This is not Roman nationalism speaking, it is Roman pragmatism. The jurists knew that Rhodian practice worked. By incorporating it, Rome ensured uniform rules across its vast maritime empire. In my view, this is one of the strongest examples of Rome's legal genius, not invention at all costs, but intelligent borrowing. Was it really a code? Calling the Rhodian Sea Law a code can be misleading. It was not a systematic statute book like Hammurabi's Stele or Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis. It was closer to customary law, refined through repeated use. Most of what we know comes indirectly, from Roman texts, later Byzantine compilations, and medieval maritime traditions that trace their lineage back to Rhodes. That makes it fragmentary, but also flexible. Its survival across centuries suggests that it answered a real, persistent need. In fact, many medieval sea laws, such as the Rolls of Oleron and the Consolado del Mare, echo Rhodian principles almost word for word. This continuity is astonishing. Few legal ideas have traveled so far, for so long, with so little alteration. Law without a state. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Rhodian sea law is that it functioned without a centralized enforcement apparatus. There was no Rhodian navy policing every ship, no global court of maritime arbitration. Compliance was driven by reputation, reciprocity, and economic necessity. If you refused to follow Rhodian rules, merchants would avoid your ships, ports would distrust you, and credit would dry up. Law operated through networks rather than coercion. In a way, this anticipates modern international maritime law, which still relies heavily on shared norms rather than a single global sovereign. The sea resists absolute control. Law at sea has always been cooperative or nothing. Moral logic beneath the pragmatism. It is tempting to see the Rhodian sea law as purely utilitarian, but there is a moral dimension beneath the surface. The principle of shared loss implies a belief that community survives individual property. Cargo exists to serve life and trade, not the other way around. This moral instinct reappears later in Roman and Christian thought, where necessity can justify extraordinary actions. Throwing cargo overboard was not theft, it was a justified sacrifice for the common good. Personally, I think this is why the law endured. It felt fair. Not perfect, not sentimental, but fair enough that people accepted it even after the storm had passed. The Mediterranean as a legal laboratory. The Rhodian sea law reminds us that the Mediterranean was not just a space of war and empire, it was a laboratory of legal innovation. Greeks, Phoenicians, Romans, Jews, and later Muslims and Christians all traded across the same waters, borrowing rules that worked and discarding those that didn't. In this sense, maritime law was one of the earliest truly international legal systems. It crossed languages, religions, and political borders with ease. The sea did not care who ruled the land, it demanded competence, cooperation, and compromise. Modern shipping law, insurance contracts, and international maritime conventions still rely on the concept of general average. The paperwork is more complex, the ships are larger, but the logic is unchanged. Every time insurers calculate shared losses after a maritime emergency, they are unknowingly echoing a Rhodian solution devised more than 2,000 years ago. That continuity is humbling. It also raises a provocative thought: some of our most durable legal ideas were not created by philosophers or legislators, but by sailors trying not to drown.